welcome to Media Lit, where we treat each piece of media like great literature. I'm your host, Randy Elaine. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Kris Ingersoll. Kris, how you doing tonight?
So good, Randy. Brother, I got to watch something in preparation for this episode that I have never watched before, something I have been ashamed to admit I had never watched before. So tonight I'm particularly stoked to be joining you for this chat. How was your week, buddy?
Oh, phenomenal. I got to rewatch this episode a couple of different times because, despite the title, this episode is not small potatoes. The X-Files is not small potatoes. It's a valuable and important property that I'm excited to bring into my life. But why are we bringing it into our lives? That's because we are joined by a special guest, Madison Charbonneau, who is a fan of many forms of media, including the X-Files. Madison, how you doing tonight?
I'm good. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to talk about all the nerdy things about the X-Files that I love. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to ramble about it for a bit.
The honor and the pleasure is all mine. Madison and I go way back to UMass Amherst. We have a memory, or I guess I should say I have a memory that is strong for me of running into Madison at a Ben Folds concert. And in the live version of the song Underground on the live album, someone in the audience yells, "Who the fuck are you?" to Ben Folds during the opening of the song. And Madison and I ran down to shout that out to him during the live show. And I was at least very proud of myself in that moment. But more importantly, I usually have people plug all their social media and stuff at the end of the show. But Madison is one of my top tier social media follows. So if you find yourself over on Twitter, you want to look for Madison at Log Lady Trainee. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Log Lady Trainee is my handle, at Log Lady Trainee.
Now, folks, the fun does not stop there because Madison is always changing up the display name to something incredible. And during the recent wave of Dune excitement, she crafted the incredible screen name Mawad Dweeb. Which
yeah, Dune Dweebs.
It's just, A plus all-star material. And of course, Madison is your one stop for all Bill Hader news.
Yeah, a lot of tweets about Bill Hader. So, and Bill Hader related projects.
Phenomenal. So, folks, if you are here today and you haven't had a chance to check out our title and check out the homework assignment for today, we are diving into the X-Files, Season 4, Episode 20, Small Potatoes. That's available on Amazon Prime. That's available on Hulu as well. Now, Kris and I are X-Files newbies. I think I've got a little bit more X-Files under my belt than Kris. I used to watch it now and then in syndication back in the old days. And then maybe 10 or so years ago, I think the X-Files was on Netflix at the time. And I know I watched a full season or two, but my memories of the details are pretty spotty. So to dive into this incredibly fun, noteworthy episode really brought me back into the whole fandom, got me really excited for everything. But folks, before we can go any further, I just need to ask you, Kris, Madison, if I have to spell your name anywhere, do you have any silent letters in your name? Because I certainly do not want to offend you.
No silent letters. Although the last three letters of my name are EAU, so people can mix them up, and that would make me feel very Eddie Van Blunt-ish,
Absolutely. And Kris, in case you were worried, I know that you are Kris with a K, as in Kringle. I would not want to misspell your name, buddy.
Nothing bums me out more. It's not offensive. It's just disappointing. I like my name. I like being Kris with a K. I think Kris with a K is a much different person than Kris's with C's and H's.
Oh, 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. Kris, do you have anything you want to share with us before we dive into getting to know Madison a little bit better and her connection with the X-Files?
Yeah, man. I thought I'd start us off with a little fun. Is that cool?
I love fun.
Most of the time I do too. I think folks who know me well enough would argue that I don't always love fun, which is fair. But tonight I'm in the mood. And so, I don't know, X-Files for me is a fun topic. I was excited to get into the show because I don't like conspiracy theories, but I like legends and I like lore. And so cryptids have always been, for me, like one of the most fun little local legends that we have to share. Big Supernatural fan here. Any Supernatural fans? That show did a great job of exploring local legends, cryptids. I don't know how much X-Files does that, but I'm curious. Are you aware of like the cryptids of the world? Are you aware that actually there are 2 legendary creatures here in our very own Massachusetts?
No.
Yeah.
Tell me about them.
Well, we've got 2, and I'll get there. But first, I'm curious. Do either of you have a favorite, like, legendary creature?
I really think that like Bigfoot is super interesting because it's so pervasive and it's so like people are really, really like it has like a like a cult following. Like people who are really deeply into Bigfoot are like diehards. And so you kind of want to think that like maybe, something's going on that we don't really know about. And like for this many people to be super into it. Yeah, but I'm always sort of drawn to like Bigfoot stories.
Yeah, I dig that. I think Bigfoot's like the icon, right? When you think
Right,
of
yeah, he's like the
legendary
number
creature.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah, top
for
guy,
sure.
Bigfoot.
Yeah, I'm going to hop in and say I was a big fan growing up of the film Harry and the Hendersons,
Right.
which featured a lovable Bigfoot. I've also got to steal the other biggie, which is the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie. Learning about that creature at a time when I was a young kid, obsessed with dinosaurs, reading through my dinosaur encyclopedia into the wee hours of the morning instead of sleeping. That one always felt to me as a child like it really could be real. That was the one that was easiest for me to wrap my mind around. And the mystery of that stuck with me for a while. Most fun cryptid to say would be Chupacabra.
Definitely.
Chupacabra is a great one. I was hoping somebody would say it tonight. I'm with you though, Randy. I'm a big fan of Nessie. I think for the same reasons. It seems the most believable. Like sea monster, sea serpent legends are pretty pervasive. I have no issues thinking that there's an ancient creature of the deep that parades around Loch Ness. But maybe that segues us pretty easily into our local cryptids. Did you know that here in Massachusetts, there's such a beast as the Gloucester sea serpent?
Oh.
Oh, wow.
It's actually the most well-documented sea serpent in the legend and lore of sea serpents. There have been thousands of sightings. The earliest was in the 1600s. The most recent was in 1980. Descriptions of the Gloucester sea serpent vary. Sometimes it's sort of very snake-like. Sometimes it has humped back and sort of a dinosaur-like head, sort of like you picture the Loch Ness Monster having.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These fishermen who saw it in 1980, like at first swore to never speak of it. But then sort of it got out to the point where they had to, as a group, answer some questions. And they did. They were solemn. They were terrified. They said its serpent-like eyes turned to us, and it was pure evil. And apparently they never spoke of it again. They gave like the one interview and then never, ever spoke of it again. So I'm inclined to buy into this Gloucester sea serpent. But then separately, in Dover, Mass, there is a demon. Are you guys familiar with Dover, Massachusetts?
Yeah,
Nice
yeah.
little farmland. In the 70s, several teenagers, over the course of a few evenings, spotted this white, alien-like creature with spindly fingers. What's interesting is that when plotted on a map, each of the sightings lines up in a perfectly straight line across about 2 miles of Dover. Hasn't been seen since.
Oh, that's so creepy.
But yeah, folks believe in the Dover demon. We've got our very own little legend.
Kris, I don't know if I believe, but I want to believe.
That's more me, right? Like I just want there to be something more out there. I want to believe.
Yeah, if you go a little further south of Boston, Kris, you will hit the legend of the Bridgewater Triangle, an allegedly deeply haunted and mysterious area of Massachusetts, which, to be honest, I don't put much stock into. But if you go reading, you can find reports of, like 6-foot tall birds and ghosts and other paranormal activity. it's a wild ride. Madison, have any of those made it to you, or maybe down in our little seaside towns where we grew up, maybe something more of a paranormal variety?
Yeah, we grew up in like a pretty old-timey part of Massachusetts, and a lot of legends, a lot of lore, a lot of atrocities committed on the land we grew up on. Um but I remember my friends and I driving in these like backwoods of Mattapoisett where you grew up, I think. And there's like I forget what the name of the street was, but there was like a cemetery on it, and we like parked across from it, and you're supposed to like wait and like see if you see any ghosts at the cemetery after night. And like it was really terrifying for like a 14, 15-year-old, but it was probably we were just scared in the dark. But
Madison, I am sitting a little more than a mile from that
are you really?
location as we speak right now.
I knew it. Oh, I knew you would know what I was talking about. Yeah. But yeah, super creepy.
I'll avoid fully doxing myself, but
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
I know what you speak of. I've heard the legends. I've not had any
Okay.
encounters personally.
Yeah.
That you
Scary
know
stuff.
of.
Absolutely beautiful. All right, folks. We just dug into our personal X-Files here, but now it's time to get into what Media Lit is all about. And yes, that's treating a piece of media like great literature, but more importantly, it's getting to know each other and getting to know our guests through the media that really means something to them. So Madison, I've been chasing you for this podcast and some other projects for a while. We've already established I'm such a fan of your media takes and your attitudes. And when we finally, touched base about Media Lit, the X-Files came to mind pretty quickly for you, which was exciting for me because it wasn't one of your fandoms that I knew the extent of going into the conversation. So that was really exciting. So if you don't mind, Kris and I want to dig into your relationship with the X-Files a little bit, and I'm going to hand things over to Kris for the first question.
Yeah, I'm really curious to know, when did you get started? Did you watch the kind of original run? What's your earliest and most
Yeah.
important memory?
I was pretty young when I started watching it. I must have been like 7th or 8th grade, maybe, in its original run. I kind of had like free reign to watch whatever I wanted as a kid. Like, parents were not super like overbearing about what I was taking in my eyeballs. So,
Hmm.
um, but I remember seeing an episode on TV kind of like casually that just really freaked me out. And I was really into that feeling. Like, I love to be scared and I hate to be scared at the same time. And so, um, I don't even remember how I got so deep into it that early, but I got deep into it, like really, really dedicated. Had like X-Files t-shirts. Um, my mom would buy me these like, do you remember how like they would like novelize the like an episode of TV and you could like buy it at
Mhm.
Barnes and Noble? Yeah.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
had a bunch of those. I had like X-Files guides. Like I think at one point, this is like deep cut nerd stuff, but like I think at one point I had like Mulder's FBI badge number like memorized. Like I was real into it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's deep. That's deep.
Yeah, it's real deep nerd stuff. Yeah, I love hard.
I love that feeling. Just being
Yeah.
super scared and being into that feeling is what you said. I really dig that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like kind of like I want to turn it off, but I don't want to turn it off. I want to watch more.
No, I absolutely love that because I was trying to remember like how it was that I missed the X-Files. And unfortunately, I realized that there's a really boring answer to that question. And that is, as I was approaching the correct age that I might have been able to watch the X-Files. And I did deal with a lot of parental regulation with what I watched and whatnot. But I can't even blame them because I reached an age where I would have been, more than welcome to watch the X-Files. And the reason I'm a little embarrassed to admit is I was using every spare moment to play GoldenEye on Nintendo 64.
Never apologize.
And I think that's
Yes, you did.
why, I think that's why I never got sucked into the fandom. And I'm so happy that, more television and film has found its way into my life in the intervening years. All right. So, Madison, you love this show. You sometimes love to be scared, but you also kind of hate it. There's some excitement there. But, you've grown up with this show. It's evolved. Fox Mulder, Dana Scully have evolved. Is there anything about this show or the performances or the vibe that still kind of influences you to this day? Maybe your larger interests, your values in life, your personal style, anything like that?
I think like every queer person falls in love with Dana Scully. And so like every queer person has been Dana Scully for Halloween at some point. So yeah, I think just the fact that like there was such a strong, I hate the phrase strong female character. It's like so reductive, but like
Mm-hmm.
someone who like there was this like Mulder, Scully, will they, won't they, but love was not like her goal in the show. She was like the logical doctor to like Mulder's like flighty nutcase. And so I thought that was such a really interesting like twist on kind of like an old trope, like the smart one and the goofball, but she's the smart one. But yeah, and I think I just in terms of like what I watch and what I take in, I really sort of hold like a high standard of like will they, won't they relationships to like Mulder and Scully because they dragged that bad boy out. Like they were not like letting you off the hook early with them. So you have to really put they earn it. They earn it in this show. So I really hold like a high standard for that kind of stuff for media. And also like a crime procedural. Like this is a kind of a baked in, dyed in the wool crime procedural show. And so like any show that's got like a baddie of the week or a monster of the week or something like that, X-Files really kind of did it right for a long time. And so it's kind of hard to see, shows that kind of blow it. So no shows being named, but yeah, X-Files is really formative for me in that, like holding it to a high standard.
Kind of you not to drag any other show's names through the mud here.
Yeah,
So
no.
kind.
Oh man, I love your take on Gillian Anderson as well, right? Because at this point, she's basically television royalty.
Yeah. She's an icon, a legend. Like, what can't she do, And this was kind of like her first, like, our introduction to her. And she's just so darn good in everything she does.
Amen.
Well, I understand now, I guess, how this show probably influenced some of the things you watched after that. But did you share the show with anyone? Do you associate X-Files with any like relationships in your life?
I had a really good friend at the time, my friend Nikki, who this was like in middle school too. We had like matching X-Files t-shirts. And we like during homeroom, we would go like help out in the like home ec room. We would like go like turn over like laundry and I don't remember what we were doing in like the home ec room, but we'd go into our homeroom and we had to sign in on the board to like say, yeah, we're here and we're going to this other room. And so we would sign in, but we would like draw like the alien face like after our names because we were like so deep into the X-Files. And it was the 90s. So like, remember alien stuff was really big. So yeah. Real dorks.
Oh, yeah. Little pointed chin or head or black eyes. Absolutely.
Big eyeballs. Yeah. Maybe a little like 2 lines for the nose, maybe. But yeah, it was big.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, at the same time, we're getting Independence Day. We're getting Mars Attacks, where it was deeply baked into our psyches. I feel like I went from those dinosaurs I mentioned earlier straight into this alien obsession. I love the way you captured that.
Yeah, the 90s were big for alien media.
Oh, yeah. And then they made Signs and everything ended.
Yeah, and then they made Signs.
Remember the aliens and how they communicated? It was like sort of a...
Oh, God.
Oh, did they do a clicky?
Yeah.
Clicky click thing? Okay, I blocked that part out. I just remembered the wife pinned to the tree and the cups of water.
Yeah, and the tinfoil hat.
Swing away, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Good old M. Night. Madison, you love the X-Files. We are less well-versed in it, but I know Kris and I both had a great time, and we are thrilled to talk about this episode. But before we do that, if you love something, you've got to be able to acknowledge its flaws. So, what are some flaws with the X-Files in general, or if you want to zero in on small potatoes that we're talking about tonight, that's okay too.
Yeah, one of the main flaws of the X-Files is that it's a show that didn't get out at the right time. it goes on for maybe like
Mm.
2 seasons too long. David Duchovny leaves the show at one point, and it just becomes like a different beast. And in my opinion, those last like 2 seasons are just like not good. The reboot was fun. It was like fun to revisit it. Like in 2016, I think it came back. And I remember watching it and being like, yeah, this is like what I want from X-Files. Kind of silly, kind of irreverent, but kind of an overarching story. But yeah, those 2 final seasons are just kind of trash for me. Which I think is also why I haven't done like a real big rewatch of it in a long time, because I'm a completionist and I'm
Mm.
like, I don't want to sit through those. But and then about this episode, I think one of the big things we have to acknowledge about this episode is that like it's if you made this today, it would kind of be deep. I mean, it is deeply problematic, even making it for the 90s. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's predicated sort of on this idea that this man is impregnating these women without their consent or knowledge. And so we have to kind of acknowledge that, like, today, this episode may have been treated a lot differently than it was back in, the mid to late 90s. So also, like, it's pretty dated. Like, you couldn't make the X-Files today because we have cell phones. And so we have GPS, a lot of like the important like stumbles in episodes and plot lines just wouldn't exist anymore because we have new technology. So
Yeah, I think, you're probably making me realize a sad fact, which is that like all those cryptid legends that we fawned over earlier are probably
Mm-hmm.
proven more and more untrue as every day goes by, where there are literally billions of people around the world with a camera in their hand at all times, and we don't have more photographic or video evidence of these things. Disappointed to kind of come to that conclusion just now as we're talking, but yeah, I totally agree. Right, everything about the idea of this falls apart if you've got a cell phone and all the technology that comes with it. There's a lot about this particular episode that requires a suspension of disbelief in terms of like the
Mm-hmm.
basic powers of discernment that the average human may or may not have. But certainly if they had smartphones, this would have gone a lot differently.
totally, yeah. They do have, they have cell phones, but they're like those old clunky like Motorola's. And like at one point, I think like Mulder or Scully calls Mulder and is like, come to the hospital, and he's like, okay, and like that's the extent of their conversation, like no context.
Yeah.
Like like sure, all right, yeah, that could have been a text.
Yeah. It could have been a text, is right.
Yeah.
So there we have it, folks. If you were worried about the realism of this episode, we've acknowledged it. I'm sure it'll sneak back in. But we are here to have fun. And the first way I want to try to have a little bit of fun, Madison, is I've seen a bit more X-Files than Kris, so I'm going to let him go first in this activity. But we've each prepared a list of 3 things that we think we know about the X-Files.
Okay. Great.
We're hoping we can share those with you, and you can let us know if we got any of this right or if we are just way off track. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yes, let's do it.
All right, Kris, I'm going to hand it over to you for your list first. I'm curious to see what you came up with.
Okay, I'm going to shift down my list because the very top item was something that I was fairly certain I knew, was fairly certain was true, right? That there is a will they, won't they romance between Mulder and Scully, and you've already hit that pretty well here.
Yeah.
So instead, I believe in the world of X-Files, aliens / the supernatural or otherworldly do definitively exist.
Yeah, that's kind of like the central tenet of the show, right? Like, is it real? Like Mulder, the hook is that when Mulder was a child, his sister was quote unquote like abducted by aliens. And so he's kind of like chasing that throughout the whole show. And so, but yeah, definitively, I would say the supernatural exists within the world of X-Files. Yeah.
Sweet.
Nice. Good job. Point
Thank
one.
We've established that we are newbies.
That's great.
All right.
Yeah. What about you, Randy? You got one?
All right. So my first one, Madison, is am I correct in understanding that late 90s band Eve 6 is named for an X-Files episode or character or something of that nature? Does
Yes.
this ring a bell to you?
Yes. I think the episode is titled is the episode titled Eve 6? Or the episode titled Syzygy. I forget. But yes, they are named after an X-Files character / episode. Yeah.
I'm so thrilled to know that now. Thank you, Randy. All right, my turn, I guess.
I just did a little Google. It's just called
Okay.
Eve.
All right. Yeah.
And as I'm seeing it, I think I actually remember watching this in that 10 or so years ago watch that I did. They're like maybe like clones of the same girl or
Right.
something.
Yes. Hence Eve 6.
And Eve 6 is the 6th. Okay. Yeah.
It's all coming back to me too.
I'm gonna have to I'll do a deep dive later because I need to know more. All right, I've got another one for you. I think I hope for Mulder's sake that over time Scully is converted / convinced.
I think so, yes. I think I would say that, yes, she becomes way more open to the supernatural, if only because of, like, some stuff she endures throughout the show that is, like, we'll talk about later, because this season is kind of a big and heavy season, and that's why this episode being so funny is kind of like a really important moment for the show. But yeah, she does endure some stuff that is beyond explanation, and I think becomes a little more open to that.
Okay, good to know. Because this episode, I think it's debatable at the end, right? Whether or not there's anything truly supernatural going on. So
Yeah.
interesting.
All right. My next question, Madison, is why did the bare naked ladies hope the smoking man was in this one?
So the cigarette smoking man is like a mysterious figure in X-Files lore. He's kind of like this like FBI undercover informant, good guy / bad guy / like unknowable guy who sort of like has all the answers, and he's like always smoking cigarettes, and like every scene in his face is like half obscured. But yeah, cigarette smoking man is a big character in this show. His name, like, in the credits is Cigarette Smoking Man, so, yeah.
Beautiful.
I only ever knew him as Smoking Man, so I'm going to jump right into my third one here because it's a total piggyback. I was going to say that despite the show being like formulaic, kind of monster of the week type style, that there is a driving central storyline and even like a central big bad, who I would have before this told you was a character called Smoking Man, who I believe supernaturally smoked in some way.
Supernaturally smoked. Yeah, he's just like emitting smoke from his body. No, yeah, you're pretty right on that. Like, I think the overarching big bad is the government in the X-Files. Like they're kind of the what do we keep under wraps? What do we let Fox Mulder know? Because he's kind of like this dogged, like rogue FBI agent. But yeah, I was going to talk about that later too. Like, there are two kinds of X-Files episodes, really. Like, there's the overarching plot-heavy episodes, and then there are these goofy one-offs. And there's more, like, kind of goofy one-offs than overarching plot, but season 4 is really overarching plot-heavy, and so when we got to Small Potatoes, we were like, thank you! Like, finally! Yeah, so...
I can totally relate to that. I think I said earlier, I'm a big Supernatural fan. And so for me, a lot of the comps are directly to that. And my gosh, those first 3 seasons are fun and more formulaic. But as they get through 4 and 5, it gets super heavy. Yeah. And each fun one-off episode is like a stop by an oasis in a hot desert, right? It's like a delicious drink of water.
Yeah, it's like comic relief, like so necessary to what is like a really heavy plot. Like, Scully gets diagnosed with cancer in season 4. She like is abducted and they implant something in her, and then they take the implant out, and taking the implant out it basically like spurs like cancer on in her brain. And so like we've been like dealing with this for like episode after episode. It's so heavy. And then we finally get like that like oasis of like, we're going to do a silly one, a one for us. Yeah.
That's beautiful stuff. All right, my next question. So in this episode, we get a near kiss between Mulder and Scully, or I guess technically Scully and Van Blunt disguised as Mulder. Now, I don't recall this airing live, but I can only assume that they could not resist doing some really heavy like promo baiting to make you think we're getting that Mulder and Scully kiss. So if you happen to recall whether or not they did this with this episode, that's cool. But is that something they did like on the regular? Is try to bait you with the promos to think you're getting a payoff?
I mean, yeah, there was a lot of that. I think the worst culprit of that was there were like a couple X-Files movies, and I think like the first X-Files movie, there was like a moment where we were like, it's finally gonna happen. We've waited and waited and waited, and like it like they like teased it in the trailer. We were like clawing at our faces, really excited. I was maybe like 17, whatever, maybe younger, and it's like it's a total wash in the movie. Like it's like a fake out, and we were devastated as a fandom. We were crushed. It was upsetting. It was a cheap shot. Yeah, they were always kind of you hate to see it, you know, but yeah, they were always kind of teasing that stuff.
I had wanted to ask then, since we're on this topic, was the will they won't they really heavy at this point already through seasons 1 through 3?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty heavy from the jump. Like it's their chemistry on screen was just like so outrageous that like there's no way to not kind of write it in the script. So yeah, and Mulder's character is sort of just like overtly flirtatious all the time, no matter like who he's talking to. And so yeah, it was like pretty heavy at this point. This was not like something that we were shocked by, you know.
Got it.
Right, yeah, like even in this episode should we be picking out Chinatown and Scully?
I mean, in like one of maybe it's the first episode, even the pilot. He's like doing a stakeout with her, and she brings food, and he says like, if there's a root beer in here, it might be love. And like that's like the pilot or the second episode, like real early on. And so he's kind of always doing that stuff.
I see. So this episode was the writers giving us like, we're giving you what you want, but we're not giving it to you, right? Here's Mulder and Scully in the romantic moment, but it's not Mulder. It's Eric. It's Eddie, rather.
Yeah, it's Eddie faking us out.
Oof. Perfect. All right, this one's not so much of a question as the one thing that stuck in my mind, the most vividly from my watch of the first season or two. But I just wanted to get Madison to confirm, and I think this is also a nice segue into our big bad of the week. But Madison, is it every 30 years that I need to worry about Eugene Toombs coming out of hibernation to potentially eat my liver?
Yeah, I think it's every 30 years. I haven't done the math, but we might be close to it at this point.
Now, I'm going to confess, I tried to keep myself in the dark for this as much as possible, but I did do like a little background check on Eugene Toombs before I brought up this statement. So Kris, if you are not familiar, the reason I bring up Eugene Toombs is this is another sort of genetic mutant type recurring character on the X-Files. And I forget what their pseudoscience explanation was for him, but more or less he can like squeeze into tiny spaces, and it's gross and creepy. Weird and terrifying. And that feels like it's got some connective tissue to our villain here. Certainly not the exact same genetic mutation, but there's some vibes there that had me thinking of Toombs.
Yeah, the muscle striation and like his ability to like change his body to do whatever he wants. Yeah, it's very Toombs-like.
Absolutely. All right, folks. We're gonna make our transition into really digging into this episode and what's so special about it to Madison, and now what's so special about it to me and Kris as well. So this is the point in the show where I am going to attempt my recap of the show. I'm going to try and hit all the big points. And then the two of you are going to hopefully critique me. I've been getting a lot of compliments, so I think I need to be taken down a notch or two. So feel free to zero in on something that I've not emphasized enough. We open on a woman in labor as she is carted to the delivery room. She tries to avoid a nurse's questions about the father of the child before finally admitting that he is from another planet. In short order, the doctor delivers a healthy baby girl with a vestigial tail that waves and oscillates in an unsettling manner. The doctor raises the stakes when he responds by saying, "Not another one." Agent Fox Mulder is quickly drawn to the anomaly after reading a hyperbolic story about the series of unusual births in a tabloid. Dana Scully arms herself with her signature skepticism, and the two are off to the races. An interview with the new mother, Amanda Nelligan, quickly brings her grasp of reality into question when she explains that the child's father is named Luke Skywalker, and he is what's called a Jedi Knight. Nevertheless, Mulder and Scully can't argue with the very real pattern of babies with tails, so they seek out connections between the cases. When they learn that all of the babies share a common father and that 4 of the 5 mothers were working with the same fertility doctor, he becomes suspect number 1. Fortunately for the fertility doctor, janitor Eddie Van Blunt's severe case of plumber's crack allows Mulder to spot the telltale scar where a vestigial tail used to be. Here's where we fast forward a bit. We learn that Eddie is a unique genetic specimen with an extra layer of musculature beneath his skin that makes it particularly malleable. Apparently, this genetic trait is so advanced that he can perfectly mimic the look, shape, and even height of other folks. Does this make any sort of sense? Of course not. But that's not the point. Van Blunt uses his powers to escape custody, evade the federal agents, and unsuccessfully fish for compliments from his ex-girlfriend, Amanda Nelligan. Yes, he posed as Luke Skywalker in order to, Anyway, Van Blunt manages to kidnap Mulder, lock him in the basement with what appears to be his old lunch from the 4th grade, and he heads back to DC with Scully. We get to see David Duchovny in the performance of a lifetime as he captures everything a self-loathing incel might do if they could look like David Duchovny and take his body for a test drive. It's as bad as you can imagine, but the performance is comic gold. Ultimately, he attempts to seduce Scully. He seems to be making progress until the real Fox Mulder suddenly bursts into the room to end the charade. After a brief time jump, Mulder goes to visit Van Blunt in prison, where he creepily encouraged Mulder to sow his wild oats. We all feel the ick. All right, folks. These are getting longer and longer on me, but is there anything that I missed or you'd like to phrase differently or you'd like to add to the essential points of the episode?
I think that was pretty good. The only thing I would add is that there is sort of like a central question in this episode that they talk about when they're at the dad's house of what is the nature of who you are? Is it who you are internally, or is it the way you're treated by other people? And I think that's like a central tenet of this episode.
Absolutely love that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I hope that we will uncover more of that thematic center of the episode as we move forward, but I'm glad that you brought it up here because despite the fact that I'm really interested in David Duchovny's humorous performance, there really is a good episode here.
Yeah, that's kind of like the thing of the X-Files, right? Like they're going to make you laugh and it's going to be silly and stupid, but like they are asking sort of deeper questions about like the nature of stuff.
Super cool.
Absolutely perfect. This is the time on Media Lit where we do a deep dive into the episode. I feel like I just need to address an elephant in the room, and for me at least, that is Christine Cavanaugh, who plays the Star Wars loving Amanda Nelligan, and in my eyes, she is a legend. She was the voice of Chucky Finster on Rugrats. She was the voice of Babe the pig. She was the voice of Dexter, of Dexter's Laboratory. Oblina from Ah, Real Monsters. Goslin from Darkwing Duck. She even made a couple of appearances on Salute Your Shorts, another central show from my childhood. I was trying to place her voice the whole time I was watching this episode, and it was driving me nuts that I felt like I knew her. And that just blew me away, and then, of course, led me to the tragic news that she passed away in 2014, which was a huge, huge, huge bummer to read about. But I really loved her in the role. I think she brought something special to it. Did this strike either of you with any intensity? And whether or not it did, do you think that she served an important purpose in that role as Amanda?
She's such a 90s icon, right? Like I'm a millennial and like her voice is such a huge part of my childhood and growing up. And like The only reason I knew who she was in this episode is because of that appearance on Salute Your Shorts where we like saw what she looked like. And her voice is so iconic that like you can't like mistake it. And I think she does bring a really important thing to this episode because she kind of is in a way like a stand-in for like the insane X-Files fans. Like she's a nut job Star Wars fan. She's seen Star Wars 368 times and she'll tell you like she's like, I think I'm going to break 400 by the end of the year. She's like really dedicated, but at the same time, we really like her and she's really like, a full normal person. And we're like, she's not nuts, she's just really enthusiastic and thinks that Luke Skywalker is her kid's dad because to her it was. Yeah, I think she really is a great stand-in for like the folks who are really deep into any sort of fandom. And X-Files loves to do that. Like they love to poke fun at like their fans and they're like, it's really like self-referential. Like we know and we're laughing with you, like that kind of thing.
I really dig that take on her because you're right. She's not crazy, right? In fact, she even kind of laughs it off a little bit. They've kept her in the hospital longer because they think she's crazy because of what she's claiming about the father, but she knows what she experienced and she's okay with that. But you might think she's crazy because she's seen Star Wars so many times. She's aware then that it's a movie. She's aware then that Luke Skywalker is portrayed by an actor, but she's still able to believe that when he arrives at her home to seduce her, that it is the Jedi Knight, Luke Skywalker from another planet. And that's not crazy. That's fandom. Every one of us, you like to think, is like wise enough and smart enough to tell the difference in real life. But aren't we so ready to believe in magic?
Yeah.
Aren't we so desperate to buy into these worlds that we imagine exist?
Yeah.
So might we not hope against hope when Luke Skywalker shows up that everything else has just been us trying to tell the stories of the real Luke Skywalker that's in fact here?
Yeah. And I think that like what I love about that scene too is that even Mulder, who is like the most willing to suspend his disbelief, she starts singing the Star Wars theme song and he like leaves the room. He's like, I cannot be party to this. And like, you're like, but this is you in every other episode. Like, this is your character.
Yep.
He sees her as ruining the credibility of his belief, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, I wanted it to be my brand of fandom, magic, whatever. Yeah.
And then aside from that, I think just back to her performance, the voice is so iconic, but it's iconic because it's so effective and affecting. So she's in a hospital bed for the majority of this episode. Like, yes, we meet her in a very dramatic moment, the intensity of giving birth and being brought into the hospital for that moment. But after that, she's laying in a bed. So there's no physicality to her performance. Yeah. There's hardly any costuming or anything else. But like the sweetness of this person, the somewhat daffiness, but like the down home, familiar girl next door, like kind person is just emanating through the voice as she tells her story. Even when she's not being particularly nice about her ex-boyfriend, Eddie, when she's talking about what a loser he was, which I mean, totally brutal in hindsight that there was Eddie. But even as she's doing that, she doesn't come across as like mean-spirited.
I think I can speak to that, Kris, because part of it's the voice. We almost have this innate trust. There's this earnestness to it. Now, Eddie's there in a deceptive way, trying to fish out some sort of compliment from his ex-girlfriend, which is incredibly creepy of him to do. And she does call him a loser, yes. But when I was watching that the second time, I was just really paying attention to the fact that like all these things he's insecure about, those are not the things that she's going after him for. Like she's not making fun of the past with the tail. She's not saying that he's like ugly or gross or anything like that. It's just like he has no drive. He has no future. And Eddie needs to believe he's a victim here. Like he was dealt this hand that's impossible to overcome. And the reality is he could be a very different person. And he doesn't want to see that he could have done that. And I think she sells that. And she, of course she broke up with this guy. My goodness.
Yeah, he's no Luke Skywalker.
Hell no. Kris, what's our next question?
All right. Well, this one's equally fun, certainly more irreverent. I want to rank the following list of 4 folks or combinations of folks, just in terms of hotness. We can just be superficial about it for a minute, if that's okay. We've got Mulder. We've got Scully. We have Mulder and Scully together. We've got Mulder and Scully apart. Of the 4, who is what's coolest? Let's start with like maybe the least sexy of the bunch.
Man, it's so hard. I think the least sexy of the bunch is, and I think we'll talk about this later, is Mulder alone. Right? He's kind of like, he's very attractive, but like as a person, his life, what he's doing at home alone.
Nerds for friends.
Yeah, nerds for friends, calling like sex chat lines. Like, well, let's put him at the bottom, I think.
I completely concur, right? There's a difference between being like objectively good looking and attractive and being hot or sexy, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know that Mulder on his own device, especially after seeing his like apartment through Eddie's eyes.
Right. Yes.
Far from hot. Far from
like
hot.
One of my favorite bits in all of X-Files too is Eddie walking around that apartment and being like, this guy has it all and he is wasting it. It's so good. Yeah.
Where do I sleep?
Where do I sleep? Yeah. He's just like, it's so funny.
Listen, you two have swayed me on the notion that Mulder belongs at the bottom of this list. And I'm going to go with that because it feels like the correct answer. I will say, watching this as a more mature adult than maybe like a young teenager, like watching my friends have crushes on Fox Mulder, I will say that I do get it. Like the boyish charm.
Yeah.
The fact that like, he's not driven by these really like stereotypical like male drives that maybe people are sick of. So I did kind of see it and feel that appeal. So definitely still sexy, but yeah, I think he has to go last on the list. I'm with both of you.
First name Fox for a reason.
I mean, come on, he's great. Yeah.
All right, so where are we doing next here? Scully solo, or do we throw in one of the couplings together or apart? What do we think?
I was going to propose maybe Mulder and Scully apart, and that might just be a problem with how we crafted the question, right? I don't think they're ever going to be as attractive if they're really together. But we need to be them kind of together and emotionally apart. So if they are fully apart, I also don't think that they're fully alive and we're not really feeling it. But yeah, it's almost like a 2-part question. If it's like their emotional separation while they're together, it maybe jumps to the top of the list. But if it's just them literally physically not together, missing the influence of the other person, we need that to kind of fuel their energy when they get together. But it might not be. I don't know if that can live up to Gillian Anderson.
Right. I'm with you on that. I think them apart in terms of like emotional and like just like separation, like they're standing on their own. They're definitely not as hot as when there's like friction with them together. Like that's what kind of brings it to the surface. So, yeah, I think that's a good 3 slot for me.
Agreed. You guys ever hold magnets close enough to feel the pull, but not let them connect, right?
Right.
It's only fun when they're close enough to actually feel the pull. If they're far enough away, there's no pull. There's no fun. So that's our 3 slot. I'm gonna be so bold as just to offer my own vulnerably here. I really wish to put Mulder and Scully together in the 2 spot because I have a number 1 spot reserved for Scully. But that's how I feel. How do you guys want to play number 2 here?
I have to go with you. Yeah, I have to go with you on that because like Scully is the blueprint, right? She's why we find Mulder attractive. She's why the tension works in a lot of ways. Her sort of like stoicism and like straight woman, like in terms of like a comedy duo, like the straight guy to like Mulder's goofiness, that tension is what makes it work. And that sort of like that. And when she cracks too, like when she kind of gives in and jokes around and is flirts back. Like, that's what makes the tension really good.
Yeah, I've got to agree with the two of you. Now, like, if I were cynical, and I were not just here to have the most earnest conversation possible, and I was just trying to get social media interaction, I could just say that we said Dana Scully was not the sexiest thing about the X-Files, and the amount of traffic we would get through pure hatred that we would ever dare to say such a thing, could really put us on the map, Kris. It could be a missed opportunity, but no, I mean, you're right. And this is not just us like gawking over Gillian Anderson. It's the whole
Mhm.
vibe. She's not giving us all of those like outdated juvenile signals rather. She is just such a confident sort of professional, and the heat comes through in these really subtle ways. Like one of my notes is, when in this episode, when Mulder first starts to deduce that the fertility doctor might be a really good suspect in this case. It's a really good bit of deductive reasoning based on what they've uncovered. And she kind of gives him this little eyebrow of like, okay, I respect that. Like, all right, bud, I want more of this. I don't need you telling me about aliens every 2 seconds. And like, it was kind of funny, that moment of deductive reasoning. I was like, that did it for her. Like, that is why this is a will they, won't they. And she communicated it just with one eyebrow
Yeah.
because she's that good.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's that good. And like, we also don't, this is not like a show where she is like made out to be a sex pot. Like,
Mm-mm.
she is not, we see
Mhm.
her in like pantsuits and like long like trench coats, and she's like got her professional gear on. We very rarely see her like in civilian clothes. Like, the end of this episode is one of the few times in the series, I think, that we see her like in her own place. So it's not
Mhm.
like, it's not that kind of sexy. It's like
Mhm.
it's the whole vibe. It's the whole thing. It's the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah. You both said it's vibe. She's contextually very hot. I think to your point, Madison, like it's the way she makes the brew work, makes the dynamic tense. The way she offers a contrast to Mulder's personality. And you're right, she's like in the same suit as him most of the time. He's just
Yeah.
without the tie.
Mhm.
And I guess like in a larger sense, it's separate from her character in the show, but just in general, the idea that this character was powerful enough, this person occupying that character was powerful enough that there's like a whole generation of women who are now getting involved in STEM careers and
Yep.
STEM education because they were inspired by this character. Like to your point, it's just all vibes, all vibes.
Yeah. She's got to be the number
Yeah.
one spot for me.
Yeah, I think we did it. We've got, Queen Dana Scully / Gillian Anderson at the top of the list, where she belongs. And thank you so much for going on that journey with us, Madison.
Anytime. One of my favorite topics.
Now, I am definitely being a bit overbearing in this conversation because I think I couldn't resist saying it 3 separate times, even in my overview. But I love David Duchovny's performance in this episode. It's so damn fun to me. But I'd love to hear from the two of you on a scale of 1 to 10. One being, I don't know what you're talking about, Randy. This was just kind of failed cheeseball acting. I don't understand why this worked for you. And 10 being, yeah, this is the height of comedy. He's achieved it. How would each of you rate David Duchovny's acting? And are there any moments that really stand out to you to help you make that determination?
I think, and I'm just saying this because I have the oversight of having seen the whole show. There is one more episode that I think that he really takes it to a 10. And so this for me is maybe like an 8 for him in terms of like his comedic acting. I mean, Fox Mulder is always sort of like loose and a goofball, but like seeing David Duchovny with like Eddie Van Blunt as Fox Mulder, he's like doing layers on layers. He's doing like cheesy taxi driver in the mirror. Like, it's so, it could be bad, it could have been really hokey and bad, but he just like sells it. It's really funny. And it's silly and goofy, and like, it's really funny. And it could have just taken a really bad turn and been really hokey, but it's not.
I agree. I won't go so far as to give a 10 because 10s are special, and I'm sure, like, I don't want to underestimate his performance elsewhere in the show, right? I'm sure the
Right.
show goes to deeper emotional places, higher stakes places, but there are 2 moments in this episode that make it a solid 9, a solid 9 for me. I'm not going to reveal one yet because it's one of my favorite gags as well. But to your point, Madison, when he's in the mirror doing that, you called it the bad taxi driver moment. He's brilliantly inept with his gun,
Yeah.
and that struck me when I watched it. I mean, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's like, especially if I assume he's typically proficient with his gun when he has to handle it in the show. I think he drew it earlier in the episode, and I was like, oh yeah, doesn't strike me as a guy with a gun, but he just pulled it out of his waistband like he's a guy with a gun. And then he's fumbling with the magazine. It's all very convincing. It doesn't seem forced or over the top. It's good.
Yeah, the little twirl on his finger killed me every time I rewatched the episode, for sure. I thought about trying to walk this back just to try to look cool, because I think you both gave a correct assessment. But if I'm being honest, what I wrote in my notes was a 15, because I had that much fun. And I think what that really means is I need to watch more X-Files, because clearly I'm going to have a great time with David Duchovny.
Yeah, you can edit this out if you want, but Randy, I have to recommend you. It's another great standalone episode, and Kris, you should watch this too. You don't really need any context for the show to watch it. It's called Bad Blood.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a Rashomon style episode where it's like the same events from both Mulder and Scully, like telling the story. It's so funny. It's unbelievable. You've got it. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on it when you watch it.
Okay, that's almost definitely going to be my next episode. Great. That sounds incredible. I will say one other thing beyond the comedic layer of the acting. There was one moment that really impressed me, just from like genuine good acting chops. Now, I looked up the episode in advance a little bit just to like get a sense of what I was looking for. Sometimes I'll do that if I know I'm going to be actively taking notes. So I knew where this was going to go. And even if I hadn't done that, it's not like they were trying to be subtle, that like Van Blunt was going to be taking on different personalities. And it was pretty much, the writing was on the wall that he was going to take over, Mulder's appearance at some point. Despite knowing that through the obvious context clues, despite reading it in advance before I read the episode, it still took me a second to realize that the switch happened. And the reason it still took me a second to realize that the switch happened is because there is, sadly, this little negative connection between Van Blunt and Mulder. And when he goes to question Amanda, those questions he's asking, well, what makes him a loser? Those really felt like things Mulder might be asking to really try to get some genuine insight into what makes this guy tick. And I almost started writing a note about the fact that, like, I love that Mulder is so interested in like uncovering these human details. And then the switch happens. And I think that really impressed me, that he still, put me in a position where I was that slow on the uptake, when, like, in retrospect, like, obviously, like, they set it up. They weren't trying to hide that from us. And that really blew me away.
Dude, that was the second moment that I didn't mention, because I was going to talk about it later.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No. I'm glad we're talking about it now. Because you're right. I was totally taken in that moment. I didn't know the switch had happened. And it was specifically because David Duchovny looks so, like, just kind of sad and bothered when she's calling him a loser. You're just a loser, like, she didn't even know what words to choose, just loser. And he was just like, like, it was kind of stinging him a little bit. And I was so impressed later to find that was Eddie, not Mulder, and that those reactions were valid for both characters. That's good acting.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're going to do a bit later where we kind of talk about our favorite jokes and quotes and moments here, but maybe we can each sneak in just like one more like funny David Duchovny comedy moment here before we move on to the next question.
There's one. So when he sees Eddie for the first time, like with the plumber's crack, and he like is like, "Hey, I want to talk to you. Like, I'm from the FBI." and Eddie takes off, like running. They cut to Mulder super fast and he like rolls his eyes. He's like, oh my God, I gotta chase this guy. And it's so funny to me. Just like, he's just like
Yes.
so tired. He's like, well, I don't have to run now. Like he's so put upon that he's gonna chase this guy down now. It's just like a little tiny little nibble of a moment, but it's so good.
Yeah, he does with an eye roll what like Danny Glover would do with a one-liner in Lethal Weapon, right? Like, why do they always run? Like something about like I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yeah.
For sure. I really love his energy when he's in the little Van Blunt cave. When he's like he's been captured and he's down there with the sad sandwich and just like not really even trying to escape. He's totally resigned to this really embarrassing and disappointing fate. And he's like barely crying out, like, anyone help. He's just pathetic and sad and just really, really well performed.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I've got several here, so you haven't heard the last from me on this, but I guess the one I'll go with right now is just what I guess I will call his attempt at bouncing a basketball. Now I am not like, a star athlete by any stretch of the imagination, but like I've never felt like a more competent basketball player than watching him attempt to dribble a basketball in Mulder's apartment. Like just the wildness of that physical acting just killed me. I had to pause the episode. However, he was like slapping that ball around with like his open palm was just wild to me. Really good stuff.
That's great.
All right. We've talked about this a little bit already earlier in the episode. But Kris, do you want to dig us into that next question in case we have anything new to add?
Yeah, I think we can move away from Mulder and more back into the structure of X-Files. This episode has some pseudoscience to try and buoy its plot. How do we feel about the pseudoscience here and how it works overall? Would we let this slide in 2024? We'll go to you, Madison.
I'm not a science-minded person. I tend to just go, sure, like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I buy in. I don't think that we would. I think we know so much more about like DNA, and that portion of and like fertility and like that portion of the episode that whole thing would probably have to be like restructured for like a modern day kind of thing. But like, I don't know anything about muscle striations and like an underlayer or like, I don't know. Sure. And like, if Scully is telling me, I'm in, like, I believe her. That's one of like the great selling points there. A little fun fact about this episode. Instead of tails, it was originally written to be wings. The babies were supposed to be born with wings.
Oh, wow.
And then they just thought that tails were funnier and easier to CGI. And so, and I think more plausible. I think they were like, well, it's also like more scientifically possible for a baby to be born with a tail than it is to be born with wings. So they were trying to make it. Yeah.
I think I agree with you, generally speaking. But before I reveal my deep feelings, Randy, what do you think?
I'm mainly just going to echo Madison. Like, our queen, Dana Scully, carries us through it. As one of our projects on this podcast, Kris has been kind enough to let me guide him through all of Doctor Who. And if you're going to be the Doctor, you need to do technobabble. And Dana Scully can do technobabble, medical babble with the best of them. And as long as you put me into a trance with that, I'm along for the ride, especially when I know I've bought into the premise of a certain show. So yeah, I'm fully fine with it. It's a good time. And I think hearing this detail about the wings versus the tails, that's such a smart decision. So great job, Madison. That's probably all I should have said. But.
No.
I'm with you both. I think that in these fantasy worlds, whether it be sci-fi, high fantasy, what have you, it's the world itself and how it treats the supernatural or the wildly fantastical science, right? And so you have to look to them to decide how you feel about the science at play. And to your point, Scully just states it. She says it. She kind of speculates. Maybe this could allow a person to do what we think might be happening here, and that's enough. They don't try and tell us that definitively. This is exactly. They don't go too deep. They don't midichlorian it. They keep it surface level enough. Mulder doesn't seem at all skeptical of that. Scully's ready to move on. I'm ready to move on. Totally works. Fine by me. Maybe I want a line in there about somehow affecting the height also. Like even Mulder being like, weird, he could do the bones too. But other than that, I'm really okay. I think more on the science front, I wanted to highlight here, maybe this is more the most 90s thing about the episode. On the real science front, because shows do this too, we got like a lovely explanation of roofies, because it's the early to mid 90s and this is like a new phenomenon. And so we get walked through like the science of Rohypnol, which I was like, whoa, this is a flashback to the TV programming of a bygone era. Because now you can just say roofies as shorthand. Everybody knows exactly what we're talking about.
All right. So next question. Eddie Van Blunt. I think we've already talked about his particular brand of toxic masculinity. You know, he's gross. He's uncomfortable. I like nothing about him. That being said, I'm just curious. Does he have any valuable insight into Fox Mulder at all? Or is it just the gross juvenile jealousy and chauvinism? Does he have any correct insights into Fox Mulder? Yes, no, partially so. What do you think, Madison?
You know, I think he does. I think him walking through Mulder's apartment and then that conversation they have at the end in the jail is sort of like, I think Eddie's like, you're too much like me, and I'm like me because of these reasons, but you have it all. Like, you're good looking, you have a great job, you're not small potatoes. Why do you live like this? And I think that is a really good insight into Fox's character. Like, Mulder is sort of always kind of like there's like a joke in the X-Files fandom that like, if Mulder was exposed to like early 2000s internet porn, the X-Files would never have been able to be made because Fox wouldn't have done anything. He would have just been like on the computer all the time. And there's kind of like that running joke like throughout the show that he's sort of like this like weird, like doesn't really go on dates a lot, is sort of like socially inept. But and I think Eddie sees that and he's like, well, I know why I'm that way. I don't know why you're that way. And I've been in your body. So and I could totally live a life better than you can. So I think he does have a little insight into Mulder, and that, like, why is he holding himself back? You know, why is he not sowing his oats, but like, why is he not like grabbing life by the horns, you know, like Eddie would do if he could?
I like mostly agree, because I think his observations are valid. I don't think he's correct. Like, I think it's like a clock, broken clock is right twice a day type thing, because I do think Eddie is a simple, juvenile, jealous, chauvinistic incel. Even to the extent that he's like oversimplifying the nature of things. Earlier, we highlighted that it's really cool when he's being described as a loser, it has nothing to do with the things that he thinks makes him a loser. The vestigial tail background, the circus dad, you know, anything about his looks or whatnot. It's more of his attitude and how he holds himself in here, right? So I would argue that if he looked like Mulder, he wouldn't be any less of a loser. You know, like in his like one moment of this is my chance, I'm going to go for it. He found some ambition enough to try and get laid. You know, but I think, you know, we learned about this character, Eddie Van Blunt, that he is where he is at in his life because of like who he is at his core, rather than anything really external about him. But that being said, he has observed something valid here about Mulder. Mulder, for all intents and purposes, with his skill set, his intelligence, his good looks, the opportunities I assume allowed him to get educated and hired by the FBI. All of these things you would think would lead to a more conventionally socially successful life. And I think Mulder does need to wrestle with why not on the other side of an encounter with a character like Eddie Blunt.
Yeah, I wanted to totally agree with all that. And I think that also is like a great echo of that like ontological question of like, what does it mean to be a person? And Eddie, you know, if he can imitate what Mulder looks like and he can live Mulder's life in like the moment to moment, but he lacks all the context of what came before that moment. He doesn't know this person. He doesn't know like what built them to this point. He can like look at their ID and know where they live, but he gets there and he's like, I don't know where he sleeps. Where do I sleep? And it's little things like that. Like you can be this person in a physical way, but you can't inhabit them in a more core manner. And I think that's like the central question of the show. Like, what does it mean to be who you are? Is it an internal flame or an outer mirror? I think that's like a Renaissance idea. The internal flame versus the outer mirror. Like, which is the real you?
Totally.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that, Madison. Yeah, like I wrote down the quote that you actually brought up earlier after the recap, you know, which was, you know, Mulder is asking Scully, you know, if you could be someone else for a day, who would it be? And he argues that it's other people's reactions to us that make us who we are. And that's a very Eddie Van Blunt take. Like you are only who other people see you as.
Yeah.
Is not necessarily the most evolved take. And I can't forgive any of Eddie Van Blunt's behaviors, but I can possibly pity him a bit. You know, like he got this message from his dad that he is small potatoes. It's so ingrained in him that we get kind of like that sloppy repeat of the line when he tried to explain to Scully why they should just leave and go home. This place is just small potatoes. It's so locked into his psyche. So to see that there's that lack of emotional intelligence is it's really interesting. But yes, it is also disgusting when Eddie Van Blunt says that Mulder should treat himself. Is probably the grossest line delivery in the entire episode.
Yeah,
he's awful.
He's like a proto incel. Like he's gross. He feels entitled to a life that he did not work to live. Yeah, he's reprehensible.
All right. Well, we're in agreement here. Let's like maybe shake off the ick that is Eddie and talk a little bit more about the fun of this episode. Plenty of gags. It's kind of a body swap, body snatcher type episode. I'm hoping we can do a bit of a round robin, talk about favorite bits, gags, quotes from the episode, anything we think is worth mentioning before we go a little bit deeper before we wrap up. Sound good?
Yes.
Cool.
Love
Let's
it.
start with you, Madison. Any favorite gags or quotes?
Birds do it, bees do it, even educated MDs do it. A great Fox Mulder line. I really thought that was funny. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, what's that? What's that? Like I'm thinking of like Cole
Yeah,
Porter, maybe. Like,
Let's call the whole thing off.
yeah, great one.
No, that's another one. Yeah.
Yep.
Let's fall in love. Let's fall in love. That's what it is.
Thank you. Yeah, that was tops on my list as well. All right, I'm gonna go in chronological order, and I'm just gonna say like the absurd, over the top campiness of just how they have all the nurses like mugging in the delivery room at the beginning. You know, like it almost feels like a Monty Python sketch because they're like they've got everyone laying it on so thick with these odd knowing looks, especially once the tale is revealed. So that's a good time for me.
I'll piggyback right there with you, because the delivery doctor holding the baby once he was like on the other side of the curtain where he couldn't be observed. I think it was probably proper technique for how you're meant to hold a newborn baby. He's sort of like cradling the head with two fingers and he's under the arm. It looks absurd, but he is especially absurd and campy in his delivery of like every look he's giving, every line he delivers. It's all quite silly, but it pulls you right into the world of the X-Files. Like as a person who'd never seen the X-Files before, when she utters the words, he's from another planet, I was like, fuck yeah, X-Files, here we go. Yeah, aliens. Like this is it. So yeah, that whole birth sequence was great.
let's see. There's one part where they're in the fertility doctor's office, and they're kind of like all confronting him, like all the couples who have used him, and one woman, he kind of like accuses them of like, well, maybe, you guys were having like extramarital affairs. And one woman says, I haven't been with a man since 1989, not counting you, honey. Which I thought was so funny. Like a great classic like husband jab.
I will piggyback off of that, because if I'm not mistaken, those are the lines delivered by Babu and Sweet Patootie, the pet names of one of our couples, and that gag in and of itself. I wasn't brave enough to start the episode with a Babu and Sweet Patootie joke, but I definitely thought about it.
Oh, dude, I would have been the Sweet Patootie or Babu all day. I'm gonna bring it back. I had really wanted to highlight just one specific body swap gag, and that was when Eddie transforms into Mulder for the first time. It's after he's trapped in the bathroom in that couple's home. They pulled it off. After that, I think the audience is mostly in on the gag, and we know when it's Eddie and when it's not. When we're expecting the reveal to come, I was not expecting the reveal in the hospital room in that scene. The gag totally worked. I enjoyed being surprised in that moment. Body swap sometimes is only for the characters on screen, and we, the audience, are kind of always aware, and we're in on the joke, and we're enjoying it, ironically. But I wasn't in on it here, and I really enjoyed that.
There are two parts of the dad's house, the Eddie Van Blunt Sr. One with the H falling off the house. Like just a great visual gag, but like the running joke that everyone misses the H in his last name, and it really, it's like kind of demoralizing for him. And then in the house, when they're talking to Eddie Van Blunt Sr., quote unquote, who's actually Eddie Van Blunt Jr., but Mulder's like, you still have the tail? And he's like, yeah, I want to see it. And Mulder's face is like, he 100% wants to see that tail. He's ready. And Scully's like, no, we don't want to see it. And he's like so disappointed. He like really wanted to see the tail. It's just another testament to David Duchovny's like great. He does his like great facial expressions and like reactions to things. Like I'm kind of always watching him to see how he's like reacting to dialogue and scenes, but it's one of my favorites.
Perfect. Madison, you just checked off the next two on my list. Those are a perfect choice. No, that's a good thing. That's why we have you here. So I'm going to go back to Dana Scully when she says, on behalf of every woman in the world, I seriously doubt this has anything to do with consensual sex. This happens when Eddie Van Blunt tries to imply that, this was something that the prospective mothers wanted to do, which is just gross on so many levels. So for Scully to get to voice that was enjoyable.
Yeah, it feels good.
Kris, anything else on your list?
Not fun. Not really even a gag. Just sorry to bring us back to the grossness, but there's a point where Eddie implies that he did nothing wrong because like women who wanted babies ended up with babies. They're babies with tails, people. They're babies with tails. Aside from the unspeakable act of horror that he committed in doing this, like the thing he's trying to shrug off is end to end absolutely absurd. And so while it's not a gag and it's certainly not funny, this character is just so black and white bad, so deliberately, maybe pitiable, but not likable in any way. And a lot of that lives in comments like that one.
I do want to say that there is one really fun 90s McGruff the Crime Dog shout out in this episode where Scully's like,
oh, wow.
It was 3 a.m. Like I would have believed him if he said, he thought he looked like McGruff the Crime Dog. I was like, I remember McGruff. Yeah.
Gruff McGruff.
Nice.
Yeah. Deep cut.
Yeah.
I could force a few more, but I'll settle for one because I think the last one that I could not live with myself if I didn't mention it would just be when Van Blunt shows up to Scully's apartment as Mulder, and we get that fisheye lens shot through the peephole with just like the big old non-Fox Mulder smile. That's a fun one.
Yeah.
My next question: how important is it for the audience to see that Scully is willing to open up to Mulder emotionally? Because after all this humor, And despite what we know about Van Blunt's intentions, Scully seems really eager to connect with her partner. How important was that for us to see, Madison?
I think the overarching scheme of the whole season, it's really important for Scully. Like, this has been a rough season for Scully. She has had a cancer diagnosis not too far back before this episode, I think. And so we're really being like put through our paces with her, and she's really being sort of like tested as a character. And so I think in a larger context, it's really important for us to see her in this sort of like relaxed, in her civilian clothes, in her house with a glass of wine, like talking to Mulder about her prom date. And I think it's important for us to know that if that was the real Mulder, she would have been in that position as well. Like, she doesn't know that that's Eddie at that point. And so we as the audience know that she's kind of like talking to Mulder like a person, not sort of like her tedious partner. And I think it's important, for us to see that this season especially.
As a non-watcher, right, I was sort of surprised to see that she was open and receptive to this moment of potential intimacy. So I was wondering how this fit into the overall context of their will they, won't they dynamic.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think her vulnerability, I don't think that that intimate moment in this episode would have worked in a previous season, because we haven't gotten that like breaking down of Scully's sort of like stoic, kind of egocentric, like self-protectiveness. And she's been through it this season, so we get it now. And it kind of feels like a nice little reward for all the 20 episodes of stuff we had to watch before.
Yeah, even though I cheated ahead, like that felt important to me when she said she liked seeing a whole new side of him, and she's sharing that high school prom story. It felt big to me even without all that history. So yeah, absolutely. This is really just an extension of the previous question. Madison, once again, I gotta go to you first, but we get very close to this kiss. They frame it in such a way that I don't think we could call it definitive whether or not she was going to fully accept the kiss. But was she going to accept the kiss? What do you think?
I mean, in my heart of hearts, I think yes. She's had a couple glasses of wine. She's opening up to Mulder. They're having like really loose conversation. I think she would have gone for it. I think she would have regretted it. I think she's a consummate professional, and I think she would have absolutely like had a crisis of faith afterwards for that one. But I think she was going to accept the kiss.
Yeah, I'm less convinced even that the framing is definitive. I think that the framing that the framing is vague, rather. I think the framing does really imply that he leans in and she is also leaning in. It's not just accepting, it's embracing. I think it's moving toward the moment. So yeah, I think you're right, Madison. Probably tons of regret, but wine-fueled, vulnerable, right? He's not in his work gear. He doesn't show up in a suit and tie with a bottle of wine. So he's casual. She's vulnerable in her at-home sweats and hangout gear. Yeah, I bought it. I think, though, the audience would not have been satisfied with this being the first kiss of Mulder and Scully. I think if there were podcasts at the time, that's all we would have been talking about in the recaps after. It's like they finally kissed and it wasn't really even Mulder and there had been wine. I think it would have been a disappointment and sort of a cheap thing. So I think they were going to kiss, but I'm glad they didn't. All right. Well, we're coming to the end here, but one of my favorite questions to ask, especially to somebody who's such a big fan of yourself, Madison, hindsight is 2020. And so if you could make one small edit to this episode, what would it be and why?
This is a tough one. I think maybe, I know that there's like a lot of suspension of disbelief and like we don't have to like feed the audience. You don't have to do the audience's work for them. But I think if we kind of like had like maybe one little scene or one little explanation line of how Mulder got out of that little room, I would love that. Like maybe there's like a sign on it that says like ask janitor for keys. And so I wonder like if he had just said like, thank God for that janitor, or anything, because I'm like, he doesn't have the physical strength to like kick out that door. I don't know how he got out of there to get to Scully's in the nick of time. It would have been a nice little addition.
I agree with you there. I thought we were going to have like this Jack Bauer moment in the episode. I didn't know how there was going to be room plot wise in the edit for the escape scene, but yeah, I was kind of anticipating there had to be some moment like that. What about you, Randy?
I've got a couple of candidates, but I think the one I'm going to go with is I don't need to see Van Blunt like drop out of a ceiling to subdue Mulder. Like that felt wildly out of character. I think they could have written something more interesting. We've already got this scenario with a couple of suspects handcuffed together. So to see that play out in a way where Mulder makes an error, I think that would have fit the vibe of the episode a bit more for me. So that's what I'm going to go with.
And what were the other guys doing that they didn't witness with at least their ears? The kerfuffle in a different part of the same room. But anyways, I digress. For me, I think it's similar to Madison. I can suspend disbelief. It's totally okay. But I think I highlighted earlier that it has to feel at least believable within the world itself. And sometimes like just one too many unplausible circumstances can break the camel's back. Somehow Eddie managing to get in the house as the husband and then transform into Mulder in the bathroom and then exit that bathroom having convinced that married couple that it was always Mulder that the wife had seen running into the house, and that somehow Eddie, like all of that was just a bit of a stretch. And so like probably could have been achieved just differently. I was thinking if we don't see, if the wife doesn't witness Eddie enter the home, he gets in, he hears somebody and instantly heads for the bathroom. And then while in the bathroom, maybe makes the transformation to Mulder, or we don't see him transform. We just, he's in the bathroom, however that plays out. But I spent too much time in my first viewing kind of hung up on how dumb are these two people? Like what is happening? That was the hard part. It wasn't like if there was just like an open window, I could have bought in a little bit more. I was left feeling that these two people are painfully unaware. Like they have zero powers of discernment or instinct in the world. So yeah.
All right. I'm going to jump to our last question. This is a question that I asked in the very debut episode of Media Lit when I was talking to Kris about Batman Returns. It's kind of fallen off the list, but I think we're going to be hearing it a lot more often because I have a lot of fun with this question. And that is, if you could own one prop or acquire some other sort of souvenir from this episode, what would it be and why? And Madison, I'm going to give you the first crack at this one.
I want the superstar hat he wears at the end that all the other inmates beat him up and steal. And then the therapist just gives him a new one. I think it's so funny and like retro looking. It's like cartoonish. It's like very like almost like Care Bears like font. Yeah, it's
Yes.
really funny. I'd like that. That's my pick.
Beautiful. Kris, what are you going with? There are no Batmobiles on the table this time.
I have a real answer and a smuggle. So I'm sorry if I steal yours. So honorable mention, and this is a gag that I didn't get to earlier, and I regret that. So here we are. When Mulder is listening to Scully give her spiel on the preserved corpse that is Eddie Blunt Sr., and he breaks the tail off, and then he's trying to stick it back on the whole time while also acting super cash.
Yeah.
Just
I almost picked that.
comedy gold.
Yeah.
And so give me that broken off tail. I would love just a little glass case on the shelf with the broken off tail. But if not that, I also really loved the circus design, the poster for Eddie Blunt Sr. And his tail when he was a showman. So having that poster framed would also be a pretty sweet grab.
Awesome. So my number one, it was going to be the poster. I also had the hat on my list, and I think those are the most like distinctive visuals. I also considered the tail. But I did write a little more wiggle room into the question. So I was thinking something I would really love to have would just be like a really nice like photograph of the still of the fisheye lens shot, like signed by David Duchovny framed up on my wall. And that, as you know, I rated this performance a 15 out of 10. So I can't think of a better souvenir for me personally.
That is outside the box thinking, sir. And it's why I love potting with you.
Oh, shucks. I really appreciate it. All right, folks. This brings us to the end of another episode of Media Lit. First and foremost, I want to thank Madison for introducing us to a really fun episode of The X-Files and just giving me like a whole new attitude and energy to bring to this show moving forward. I've got some new recommendations of episodes, and I'm really excited for this fandom to slowly become a bigger part of who I am. Kris, do you think you're also going to be watching more X-Files?
Definitely. I need to know, will they or won't they?
That is the question.
And the truth is out there. So
the
let's
truth
watch.
is out there. Yes.
No, really. Thank you so much, Madison. This has been a blast. I'm always excited to meet somebody else from Randy's life. I think he highlighted earlier that we get to know our guests through this podcast, and I get to know Randy a little bit more through each guest that he brings on the pod. So this has been a pleasure.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was so much fun. I want to add one more little tidbit that one little fun fact about this episode is that it is written by Vince Gilligan, who created Breaking Bad. So, yeah, so that's the one last thing I wanted to get in there before I say farewell. But yeah, Vince Gilligan, creator of Breaking Bad, wrote this episode. So great stuff. Thank you for letting me share all my really niche, like trivia night knowledge about the X-Files with you guys. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, we had a blast too, and I quite frankly hope it will not be the last time. Madison, I did spend a lot of time, trying to plug your Twitter at the top of this episode, but nevertheless, do you think you could share that with us again? And if you have any other social media things you want to plug or any projects or whatever, we'd love to hear anything else you want to share.
Thanks. Yeah, my Twitter is at logladytrainee. And I also have a Letterboxd. It's Les Lemon, which is a 30 Rock reference. But yeah, please feel free to follow me there. I tweet a lot about like media and movies I like and Massachusetts stuff and a lot about Bill Hader. And yeah, and then I review movies like with stupid one-liner reviews on Letterboxd at Les Lemon. So please feel free to follow me both places.
Yeah, I've tried using Letterboxd a little bit, but it took me like a month to figure out that I'm supposed to be doing dumb little one-liner reviews and not like a thoughtful paragraph. So I'm very much like the newbie Letterboxd nerd, but still a cool place to be. Perhaps I'll plug it someday. Kris, do you have any socials you want to plug or projects or anything you want to talk about?
I think the movie that I teased a few weeks ago is still to come, and so let the tease linger. But for now, you can find me as always on Instagram at Kris_Ingersoll. That's Kris like Kringle.
And you can find me, Randy Allain, at Mr_Allain, ALLAIN, at Twitter. I've got links to all my other stuff there, a little portfolio of my entertainment writing and whatnot. You can also find me potting on the Pop Break Today feed, which is soon to be renamed simply the Pop Break, where you can catch me doing a podcast called Every Pod You Cast, which is a deep dive into the discography of the Police. Which we're having a lot of fun on that one. We've only got 2 episodes to go, but yeah, I've been having a great time with Justin and Kris, who let me join them on their long-running music podcast, and I've been having the time of my life with those 2 guys. So that does it for another episode of Media Lit. Thank you so much, and we will see you again next time.